Hey guys, today we're going to be building a budget CPU mining rig in 2024. So CPU mining is not as profitable as it once was, but I just happen to have all these parts laying around. So I figured it's a great opportunity to get a little budget CPU mining rig up and running and show you guys how to build one. So quickly, I'll show you what I've got here. I've got an old MSI B450 motherboard. I also have a server power supply. The one item that I don't really have is an ATX power supply. So I'm gonna try to use a PICO power supply. So this basically powers a motherboard from a server PSU. The last time I tried to use this thing, if you've been a member of the channel for a very long time, you'll remember that video. It didn't work, it almost broke one of my mining rigs, so we'll see if we can get it working today. Besides that, I'm gonna be taking off this AIO water cooler because this is gonna be going on the top shelf of my mining farm, and I do not wanna have water on the top shelf in case it leaks. It's gonna destroy everything. I also got a Hyper 212 Spectrum V3 CPU cooler, which was very, very cheap off Amazon. I'll have links for all of this stuff down below. And the CPU we're gonna be using is my old CPU from my old gaming and editing PC. It's just a Ryzen 3600. So nothing crazy. All of these parts, very cheap. You could probably build this for under $200. So let's get into it and build this CPU mining rig. Some things I forgot to mention, we have a motherboard stand here. This is just 3D printed. So I'll eventually be able to prop this motherboard up and it will stand on that. And then that will go over there to the right of my crypto mining shelf. This is where I run all my GPUs and my Asics, and soon my CPU miner up there. And the last thing I didn't mention as well is Corsair RAM. This is a 32 gig pack, RGB. You don't need that obviously, but it might look good up there. So let's get into it. So the first thing we need to do is remove our old AIO cooler and then put down some MX6 thermal paste and then put on our new CPU cooler. So let's go ahead, and luckily these are just hand twist knobs, and we can go ahead and pop this cooler off. This has been on there for quite a while. We'll see if this thermal paste is dry at all. It should just kind of pop right off. That's not a good sign. I pulled my whole CPU off. Let's check for bent pins. All right, I've never actually had that happen. Literally just pulled the CPU totally out of the socket, which means that thermal paste is really on there. But the good news is that I think it's totally fine. If you guys didn't know, in my main job, I am a quality engineer for a connector company, so I am constantly looking at different connectors with pin defects and plastic body defects. So I'm pretty good at looking at these things, and honestly, it looks like we got extremely lucky. Let's make sure the socket looks fine. I think it does. So now, I guess I need to maybe try to twist this. Is a little more precarious than I wanted the build to start. Looks like it's slowly twisting. Man, I think I just used way too much thermal paste last time. I'm gonna get like a knife or something to pry this off of there. So the ideal way to do this is to heat this up first, so this is much easier to come off. But obviously I couldn't do that here. Man, that is just like actually glued on there. Okay, there we go, I got it loose. Take that off, set it over here. Yeah, I may have put a little too much thermal paste last time around. So we can go ahead and move this out of the way now. Maybe be able to resell that or use that in a future build. Let's take one last look at the CPU. Let's see. That's what the coverage looked like, but I think we escaped a nightmare, guys. That looks totally fine. So what I'm gonna end up doing is putting that back in before I clean off any of that paste or anything. But the next step now is let's open up this cooler and start getting this installed. So I've got thermal paste all over my hands. It's not a big deal. And hopefully this has a nice, easy setup onto an AM4 motherboard. It's always hit or miss with these coolers. It's a nice big heatsink here. I got this thing for $12, which is crazy on Prime Day. That was one thing that I didn't include in my Prime Day video was CPU coolers, and I should have. That would have been smart. So that's warranty information. Here is our setup guide. Let's quickly take a look at this. Okay, that is good to go now. And now we need to take a look at our motherboard here. All right, it looks like we're actually gonna take these black plastic clips off of here to mount this specific cooler. Once I get these off, then I will be installing the CPU back in there and then cleaning up the thermal paste. But let's go ahead and get this ready. So let's go ahead and get this CPU installed back into the socket. We need to look and see which way the arrow is pointing. It is this way. So pull this bar up. Now we need to get some 99% alcohol to get rid of this old thermal paste that's on here. So I kind of like to just go ahead and get as much of this off dry as I can, and then I'll go back with the rubbing alcohol and try to get the remnants. All right, and just like that, we can actually see the CPU again. It was pretty covered. There's still some thermal paste up on the sides right here, but that's not a big deal. So we'll get our MX6. We'll dot in the middle. I just like to do a little dot in each corner. Okay. It's probably too much again, but hey, I'd rather have too much than too little. Besides when I pull my CPU out when I'm trying to take the old cooler off. All right, so now we need to figure out how to orient this. It looks like it just goes on like this. Screws into these 4 screws right here. Okay, and then we want to screw these in a cross pattern. I'm sure you guys already know how to do this. Now we will stick in our RAM, and this board nicely marks the 2 RAM slots that we need to use. Now you want to make sure that you're using dual channel RAM when you're CPU mining. It makes a big difference in speeds of how much hash rate you get. So there's the first one, and then the second one is right here. Okay. Next thing we need to do is actually mount our CPU fan to our CPU. I'm not actually going to be able to use the RGB on this fan because this motherboard uses 4-pin RGB and this fan uses 3-pin RGB, and they are not compatible. They run at, I believe, different voltages. So you want to make sure that you don't accidentally plug a 3-pin into a 4-pin. So I'm going to put it over here so that the cables are kind of hidden back there. And to do that, you need to use these little things that come with the fan. So I believe they just go on like this. If I can get them in there. And then they clip onto the heatsink right here. And actually, I think I have them on backwards actually. All right, finally got this the correct orientation. Just clip that on there, and then boom, we now have our fan mounted to our cooler. And like I said, we're not going to use the RGB, so I will tuck that away and then plug this into our, is this our CPU fan header? Yes, it is. And get rid of that little label. warranty void if removed, that tiny little label on the cable. I don't know about all that. Okay. So now we're ready to plug in our PICO Psu and just see if this thing works. I need to get a HIVEOS drive because this is going to use an SSD into HIVEOS. So I've actually got one right here. This is already flashed. If you don't know how to flash a HIVEOS drive, I'll have a link up in the description. Super easy to do. I've got a 30-minute video on it. I'm gonna run this on HIVEOS instead of Windows, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, one thing we can do is go ahead and stick this motherboard up on our rack. So this is how it's gonna look when it's mining. Looks pretty nice. It'll definitely look nice on that top shelf. So next step, we need to actually put together our PICO Psu. So let me show you guys how this works. We've got our standard power supply right here. We'll put our breakout board on it. This is going to be plugged into a PDU with this C13, C14 cable. So let me untangle this and get this plugged in here. And then from there, we're going to have one PCIe cable going into the breakout board like that. And then this is going to be powering our PICO Psu. So it's got this red 6-pin cable right here. We'll plug that into there. And now our PICO Psu is what we need to plug into everything else on the motherboard. So this is the motherboard header. Let's see if I can do this while it's on this mount. So that's gonna go like this. I hope this thing works because I've had it at my house for like 12 months at this point, and I've still never actually used it. PICO Psus you can get off Amazon, by the way. So next thing we'll plug in is our SSD. Okay, got thermal paste on my SSD. And then we need a SATA data cable. These packs, stupid cheap on Amazon, like $1 a cable. Plug this in here. And then into one of these SATA slots. And lastly, we need to plug in the CPU power, which is these two cables here. It's two 4-pins, which we will plug into the 8-pin up here. Yeah, okay, so they actually mate together into one 8-pin, so you get the correct orientation. All right, and now we are ready to boot this bad boy. Okay, so here is our CPU rig. Everything is all hooked up over here. We've got our PICO Psu plugged in. Will it work and boot into HIVEOS? We shall see. Another thing I'll have to do is plug in the Ethernet once we plug this thing up, but let's go ahead and move it up into hopefully its final resting place up there. Kind of hard to do all at once. Okay, Ethernet is plugged in. The PSU is plugged in as well. So let's go ahead and hit the power button on this bad boy and hope that this fan spins. So 3, 2, 1. Wow, the RGB still works even without the ARGB header. Okay, that's a great sign. I was honestly pretty concerned about pulling that CPU out at the beginning, but so far it's looking really good. Now it's just a matter of will it show up in HIVEOS. But let's step down and take a look at this. Nice, that's gonna be a good addition to the farm. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but check out this cool lighting I've got in here now. I've got one more strand coming for that top area, but at night or when it's a little dimmer, this lighting looks super cool. Let's see if I can turn down the lighting here. Yeah, pretty cool looking. So, okay, let's see if that pops up into HIVEOS. So it didn't show up in HIVEOS, but if you can see right there, That's saying DRAM, and we've got a red LED light indicating that there's an issue, which means I probably just need to reseat this RAM. Normally though, when you have RAM issues, the system won't even post, which would mean the CPU fan would not be spinning. But I'm gonna go ahead and try to reseat that and see if that does the trick. Okay, still nothing. That time the error LEDs were all over the place. So it said CPU at one point, which is obviously very concerning since we ripped it out of the socket, but then it turned off the CPU light and went to boot. So I don't know what's going on. I've got a little shitty GPU plugged in here and a tiny monitor. We'll see if that will work. We hit this power button again, and maybe we'll see if we can get something to show up here. All right, well now, when I hit the power button, this thing doesn't even turn on. Interesting. All I did there was plug in that GPU. So, back to the drawing board. All right, guys, been a day or two. I never could get that motherboard to work again after that quick boot that we saw. I never got it to work again. I couldn't even get it to turn on or anything. So what I ended up doing is purchasing a new motherboard, unfortunately. And I didn't want to do that because that took this rig build from $0 to $80, but it's better than not mining at all, and I can always use this for like a gaming PC or something in the future. So it is booting now. The Ryzen 3600 CPU is fine, but I think this AM4 motherboard may be toast. Definitely let me know, can ripping the CPU out of the socket damage the motherboard? I don't see any bent sockets in here or bent pins. But I don't know, I just can't get that to work, and I don't have another AM4 CPU to try with a different CPU. But regardless, we're retiring that one for now, and we've got this guy up and running. So the other update here is the PICO Psu never worked. Once I got this rig working in HIVEOS, I tried to switch from the ATX to the PICO Psu, and it wouldn't work with the PICO Psu. So I'm 0 for 2 on videos with the PICO Psu. I'm starting to think I either got a dud or these things just don't work well because I have yet to have any luck with it at all. Okay, so what's next? We've got a beautiful little CPU mining rig here right now. This graphics card will be coming off, but first let's go hop into HIVEOS and get this mining. And then we'll come down here and do some overclocking, underclocking to try to get the best efficiency we can. And then we will throw this up on the little stand up there. So I got some new awesome lighting on the rigs. It looks insane at night in the last few days. So let's get this thing mining. All right, now that we finally have our workers showing up in HIVEOS, we can jump into it right here, and we can see this is my little shitty GPU I'm using to display. We don't need to worry about that, but we can see that my Ryzen 5 3600 is showing up, which is what we want to see. So a couple things I need to do here is change this rig so that it is not thinking that it has 6 cards on it. It should have 0. And then I need to go ahead and set up a flight sheet for CPU mining. So what I'm going to do here is just duplicate one of my Zealous Zeph flight sheets, and then I'm just going to remove Zealous so that I only have Zeph. So quickly I'll jump through here. Zephyr's the coin we're going to be mining to my web wallet. We're going to be using Pool Hero miners, and then for the miner config, this is what you want to put in here. You just click this I and click this, and it'll fill all this stuff in. You want to put 1248 into the huge pages. Everything else is default. CPU needs to be on, and then we can go ahead and hit apply. And let's change this to CPU rig Zephyr. Update. And we can also really quickly change this miner. Let's go ahead and change the name of this rig. So this is going to be Ryzen 3600 CPU rig, and we can save that. Update worker. Okay, so we should start seeing this mine here in a second.
I never actually applied that flight sheet. So there we go. Let's apply that. All right, and just like that, we're getting 6.5 kilohash. We can see it right there. We can also see it right here, Zephyr. I need to eventually take this GPU off of here so it doesn't even show this right here. But 6.5 kilohash, it's pretty standard. So what's next is that we're going to dial in our BIOS settings. We're going to be able to limit our power draw to be able to get this CPU mining rig as efficient as possible. So let's go hop into the BIOS downstairs. I've got a little power monitor hooked up, and we can try to get the most hash for the least amount of watts, because this thing's going to be running at these settings for the next 6 months to a year. So we want to make sure we get them dialed in right when we start, and then you don't have to touch it again. So let's get into it. All right, so we are mining Zephyr right now, 6.5 kilohash, and we are running 131 watts, which will drop eventually when I remove this graphics card. And unfortunately, I cannot turn off the RGB on that Corsair RAM unless I boot this thing into Windows, which I don't really want to do. But either way, that RGB is not taking up a ton. So what we're going to do now is restart this thing, jump into the BIOS, turn it off, and then back on. And we're going to spam this delete key to try to get into the BIOS, and then we're going to start to mess with the voltages of the CPU to try to get similar hash rate but with less power. So okay, we are in the BIOS. Let me throw you guys on the tripod. Okay, once you get into the BIOS, you want to hit F7 to go to the advanced menu, and this is where we're going to go to AI Tweaker, and we're going to be looking at this VDDCR. This is your CPU voltage. We're going to change this to offset, and we're going to be subtracting voltage. So in this field, I want to go down 0.75. And let's save that. Basically, we're setting a 0.75 offset on the voltage. Okay, let's hit F10 to save that. And then let's let this reboot, and we'll see if we're getting similar hash rate, but hopefully for a little less power. All right, if you type in miner here, you can actually pull up the miner. All right, so it looks like we're running about 6532. On HIVEOS, it says 6540. So our hash rate stayed the same. We're still at that 6.5 kilohash range. But the good news is, look at our power over here. So we dropped a little over 9 watts making that offset change, which is great. So I'm going to record these numbers. I'm putting down the hash, the power, and the offset, or in the efficiency right here. We're going to be going for max efficiency. This first number was stock. This is the minus 0.75 offset. I'm going to reboot this and get it a little lower and see if it can be stable and maybe even get a better efficiency than right now. All right, with the 0.875 offset, we're getting 6538 hash, and for the watts, we dropped another 2 watts. We're at 120 watts, 120.7 watts. So let me write this down here. We're at 120.7, and then this was 6.538. So we'll get my efficiency here, but we are still climbing in efficiency, which is good. I'm gonna keep going maybe to 1 millivolt offset, and if that doesn't crash anything, I might stick there. And then I'm probably gonna try pulling off one of the sticks of RAM and seeing what do I get for hash rate with 1 stick of RAM. These are each 16 gigs, so this is actually a 32 gigabytes of RAM on this rig, which may be overkill, but I know that you do want dual channel. So let me go a little bit lower. We're going to drop it to 1 millivolt offset, so minus 0.1 right there, and we'll see what we come out with, and then we'll test the RAM. All right, checking in, 6536 on the hash, and 118.6, so we dropped a little, about 2 watts again. So that's probably as low as I'm going to go on the voltage, but now let's try this with 1 stick of RAM. Okay, with 1 stick of RAM, we're down to 6318 on the hash, but we only saved like 3 extra watts. We're down to 115. So let's take a look at the efficiency numbers, and this will tell us what is the best option here. and you can see that 055 is the highest efficiency, which is basically over 10% more efficient than stock settings. So the 01 offset with 2 sticks of RAM is giving us our best efficiency. Like I said, 10% better than stock. So let's go ahead and put that back on. And then I'm gonna go ahead and remove the graphics card, the keyboard, everything that's pulling power that won't be when the rig is in its normal resting place, and we'll get a final wattage calculation there, and then we'll be able to do some profit calculations to see how much this little CPU mining rig is going to make. Another thing to think about too is I'm using a bronze PSU, which is certainly not ideal. A gold PSU would be 5% more power efficient. So at the power that we're at right now, it would be like an additional 7-watt savings probably, which isn't a huge deal, but it is 5%. So this is also on 120 volt right now. It's eventually going to be on 240 volt when I plug it in up here to my PDU. So that will kind of offset a little bit, but we're still going to be 5% less than if we had a gold PSU. So, all right, I'm going to strip everything off this graphics card, and we'll get a final reading. Every time I make a hardware change on here, I have to bridge this to turn it on. So if you don't know how to do this, you just need to get a metal object and then bridge these 2 pins, those 2 in the top right, and that will turn on your rig. I've got some more power buttons coming in the mail because I ran out. So everything is unplugged. Now we'll wait for this to start hashing and get a final watt reading. So once I removed everything, it's no longer booting into HIVEOS, and we're just sitting idle at 44 watts. So I think there's one more BIOS setting I need to change. That basically, my thinking is, since I removed the graphics card, it's no longer booting because it doesn't have a display device or a graphics card. So somewhere I should be able to find a setting that says boot even if you don't have a graphics card. So I'm going to jump in there and see if I can find that, because right now it is not connecting to HIVEOS. Alright guys, final update here. Everything is now working. We are getting 6.574 kilohashes, and our power is at 102.4. I've got 102.6 here for a 0.064 hash per watt efficiency, or kilohash per watt efficiency, which is over like 15% better than stock. So this is why you want to do this before you set these up. So this CPU rig is using 102 watts. Let's go do some calculations on how profitable it's going to be. I am going to wait to put this up there. I really want to see how it looks up there. I was going to wait to make sure it's stable, but I think I'm just going to go ahead and put it up there to see how it looks with my new lighting. I think that'll be cool. So let's get it put up there, and then we'll check out profitability. All right, now the question everyone's been waiting for: what is the daily profit? So real quickly, let's see how much we're spending every day in power. 102.6 watts, 24 hours a day. It's going to be 2.46 kilowatt hours, and I need to multiply that by my electricity rate. So 2.462 times 0.11, because I pay 11 cents per kilowatt hour. We're spending about 27 cents a day in power, so basically a quarter a day. But let's see how much we're earning. I'm gonna go to CPUs, 3600. So from here, we can see that Zephyr is the most profitable coin, but it's got incorrect hash and it's got incorrect watts. So we want to go to actual calculator, find Zephyr on here, and we want to put in, what are we at right now? 6,524. And we are using 102.6 watts. And I'll put in $80 as our investment, since I did have to buy that motherboard. That sucks that that other one stopped working. I should have just left the AIO cooler on it. But if I hit calculate here, we are losing 7 cents a day.
And that is because of all the motherboard overhead and everything else. Also, the fact that we were using a bronze PSU isn't helping. So that's unfortunate, but this is something I already had laying around. I'm fine spending a quarter a day to accumulate some Zephyr. And this would be a lot better if you had like a 5800 or 5900X AM4 CPU, which I will be keeping an eye on. And if anybody knows of any good deals on one, definitely let me know, because I'll be interested. So not exactly what we're wanting to see, but you can do this with better CPUs and get profitable results. You're just going to have a little bit bigger of an initial investment. So that is how to build a CPU mining rig. Definitely let me know if you would have done it any better way. That motherboard I got, I'll have linked down below. I'm not sure if it is ideal for CPU mining, so you may want to do some additional research on that. And if it's not, and you know why, be sure to tell me why so I can do better next time. Thanks for watching Modern Mining, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.